You think you know ancient Rome. Togas, marble statues, some bald guy getting stabbed while whispering "Et tu, brute." Real cute. You don't know anything. Because the actual Roman Empire wasn't a noble civilization of philosophers and bedsheets. It was the most unhinged 1200-year group project in human history, run by men who drank wine sweetened with literal poison and would absolutely lose their entire minds if they saw a self-checkout machine. To understand just how feral these people were, you have to start at the beginning, and the beginning is already a problem. Because Rome's official origin story is that it was founded in 753 BC by a guy named Romulus, who built the city, then immediately murdered his own twin brother Remus over an argument about a wall. That's it. That's the founding myth. The most powerful empire on Earth started with fratricide over fence placement. Oh, and these two were supposedly raised by a wolf, not metaphorically. A wolf found two abandoned babies and decided, you know what? Free real estate. The Romans were so proud of this that they kept the wolf as their national mascot for 1,000 years. Imagine being so down bad for lore that your entire empire's logo is the time a wild animal adopted your founder. Anyway, for the first couple hundred years, Rome was ruled by kings, which the Romans hated so much that in 509 BC they kicked out the last one, a man literally nicknamed Tarquin the Proud, and swore they would never have a single ruler again. Remember that. They're going to forget that promise so hard it's genuinely embarrassing. So they invented the Republic. The whole vibe was SPQR, the Senate, and the people of Rome, this big democratic flex where instead of a king, they'd have two elected consuls who each served for exactly 1 year and could veto each other into oblivion. Two guys, sharing the steering wheel. What could go wrong? And honestly, for a while, it kind of worked. The Republic conquered basically everyone, and the way they did it was by being absolute psychopaths about losing. Enter Carthage, a rich naval superpower across the Mediterranean, and the most painful long-distance beef in ancient history, the Punic Wars. This is where Hannibal shows up, and Hannibal is unhinged in a way you have to respect. In 218 BC, instead of attacking Rome by sea like a normal person, this man marched an entire army, including war elephants, over the actual Alps. In winter, most of the elephants died. Thousands of his men died. He showed up in Italy frozen, miserable, and somehow still proceeded to bully the Roman army for 15 straight years. The Romans were so traumatized by this that one senator, Cato the Elder, became famous for ending every single speech, no matter the topic, with the same line: Carthage must be destroyed. Talking about taxes? Carthage must be destroyed. Talking about the weather? Carthage must be destroyed. The man had one tweet, and he posted it for the rest of his life. And eventually, Rome did destroy Carthage in 146 BC, burned it completely to the ground, because Rome did not believe in closure, they believed in arson. Now fast forward, the Republic is huge, it's rich, and it's about to be hijacked by the single most famous Roman of all time, Julius Caesar. And here's the thing they don't tell you in school. Caesar was not an emperor. Everyone thinks Caesar was the first emperor. He wasn't. He never wore the crown. What Caesar actually was an extremely charming military genius with crippling debt and zero chill, who in 49 BC marched his army across a tiny river called the Rubicon, which was super illegal, basically declaring war on his own government. He said, the die is cast, which is ancient Roman for no takebacks, and started a civil war that he won, because of course he did. He then got himself declared dictator for life, key phrase, for life. The Senate, a bunch of guys who, let me remind you, founded their entire system on the principle of never letting one man have all the power, looked at Caesar declaring himself permanent boss and decided to handle it the mature way. By stabbing him 23 times on the Senate floor on March 15th, 44 BC. 23, 60 senators allegedly involved. They were so disorganized about it that they mostly stabbed each other in the chaos. And the punchline of the entire assassination is that they killed Caesar specifically to save the Republic, to stop one man from having total power. And what happened next? Total chaos, more civil war, and then Caesar's adopted son Octavian showing up to grab way more power than Caesar ever had. They speedran the exact thing they were trying to prevent: Gold Star. Octavian renamed himself Augustus, and in 27 BC he became the first actual Roman emperor, while being very careful to never use the word king, because the Romans would riot, so he just called himself first citizen, and quietly held all the power forever. It's the oldest trick in the book. Don't call it a monarchy, call it a vibe. And for a while, this was the golden age. Roads, aqueducts, plumbing, the works. The Romans built 50,000 miles of paved roads, which is why people still say all roads lead to Rome. They built aqueducts that moved fresh water across entire mountain ranges using nothing but gravity and spite. They had indoor plumbing, public toilets, central heating in their floors. They were, technologically, light years ahead of their time, which makes what happens next even funnier. Because once you make one guy emperor for life, with infinite money and zero accountability, you are basically running a science experiment on what happens to the human brain when it has never once heard the word no. And the results are spectacular. Meet Caligula. Caligula became emperor in 37 AD, and for the first few months, everyone loved him. Then he got sick, recovered, and came back fully cooked. This is the guy who, according to Roman sources, loved his horse so much that he gave it a marble stable, an ivory feeding trough, a collection of servants, and allegedly planned to make the horse a consul. The horse. The job two grown men used to share to run the entire republic. He wanted to give it to a horse, purely to flex on the Senate, like, you think you're special? My horse outranks you. And then there's the sea thing. Caligula, at one point, led his army all the way to the coast, fully geared up for an invasion of Britain, and then, instead of invading anything, he declared war on the ocean itself, ordered his soldiers to stab the water and collect seashells as the spoils of his great victory against the god Neptune. These were trained legionnaires standing in the surf, picking up shells, while their emperor declared he had defeated the sea. The Praetorian Guard, the emperor's personal bodyguards, eventually got so tired of him that in 41 AD they just assassinated him. Which becomes a recurring theme, by the way. The bodyguards keep being the ones who kill the boss. Worst job security in history. But the goat of unhinged emperors, the one everybody knows, is Nero. And here's your childhood-ruining moment of the day. Nero did not fiddle while Rome burned. He couldn't have. The fiddle wouldn't be invented for another 1,500 years. The whole image of Nero playing a tiny violin while his city burns down is complete fiction. What he allegedly did was sing and play the lyre, which is somehow worse, because that means he watched the greatest fire in Roman history and went, you know what this tragedy needs? Live music. The Great Fire of 64, AD burned for 6 days and destroyed 2/3 of the city, and Nero, needing someone to blame, pinned it on the Christians, which kicked off centuries of persecution over a fire he probably didn't even start. Nero was also the guy who, according to the sources, kicked his pregnant wife Poppaea to death over an argument, then felt so bad about it that he found a young man who looked like her, had him surgically altered, and married him as a replacement. There is no normal way to read that sentence. When the Senate finally turned on him and declared him a public enemy in 68 AD, Nero, ever the drama king, stabbed himself in the neck, and his famous last words were, "What an artist dies in me." Bro thought he was Mozart. He was a war criminal with a karaoke addiction. After Nero died with no heir, Rome had what historians cheerfully call the Year of the Four Emperors in 69 AD, where 4 different guys became emperor in 12 months because everyone with an army basically decided, why not me? The winner was a no-nonsense general named Vespasian, and Vespasian gave us one of the most beautifully shameless moves in all of economics. He was broke, so he taxed urine. Yes, there was a urine tax. Because Romans used to collect pee from public toilets and use the ammonia in it to wash clothes and even whiten their teeth, so it was a valuable industrial resource. When his own son complained that taxing pee was disgusting, Vespasian held up a gold coin, made him smell it, and said, "Money doesn't stink." That phrase is still used today. The most quotable thing this man ever said, he said, while defending a pee tax. Speaking of disgusting, let's stay here a second, because Roman daily life was wild. Those public toilets I mentioned? They were long stone benches with holes, no dividers, no privacy, just a row of dudes doing their business shoulder to shoulder discussing politics. And to clean yourself afterward, you used a sea sponge on a stick, a communal sponge, on a stick, that everyone shared. They'd rinse it in a gutter of running water and pass it down. The most advanced civilization on Earth, and their toilet paper was a group project. Vespasian's son Titus opened the Colosseum in 80 AD, and to celebrate, they held 100 straight days of games where they slaughtered something like 9,000 animals and untold numbers of people for fun. 50,000 screaming spectators. And while we're killing myths, here's another one. A vomitorium was not a room where Romans went to throw up so they could keep eating. That's completely made up. A vomitorium was just the passageway that let crowds exit a stadium quickly. The word means to spew out, but it's spewing out people, not lunch. So congratulations, the grossest fact you learned about Rome in middle school was a lie. The real stuff is grosser anyway, because the Romans genuinely believed gladiator sweat was an aphrodisiac, scraped it off the fighters, bottled it, and sold it as a beauty product. Rich women rubbed dead gladiator sweat on their faces, and the blood of a slain gladiator, people drank it, as a cure for epilepsy. That was actual medicine. Now here's the dark twist underneath all the funny stuff. A lot of historians think the Romans were slowly, collectively, poisoning their own brains. Their water pipes were made of lead. In fact, our word plumbing comes from plumbum, the Latin word for lead. They lined their wine vessels with lead and used a lead-based syrup to sweeten cheap wine and food, because lead acetate is, unfortunately, delicious. So the empire's elites were drinking lead, eating lead, and bathing in lead-piped water, and lead-poisoning causes, among other things, irritability, paranoia, and erratic behavior. So when you ask why so many emperors acted completely insane, part of the answer might genuinely be their grape syrup was slowly turning their brains into wet cardboard. They were, in the most literal sense possible, cooked, and the insanity only accelerated. We get Commodus, who became emperor in 180 AD, and decided his real passion wasn't ruling, it was being a gladiator. So he fought in the arena himself, except the fights were rigged. His opponents had to lose, and he'd slaughter wounded soldiers and exotic animals while charging the city of Rome 1,000,000 coins per appearance. He genuinely believed he was the reincarnation of Hercules, renamed the months of the year after himself, and renamed Rome after himself too. He was eventually strangled in his bath by his own wrestling partner, a man named Narcissus, because at this point getting murdered is basically part of the emperor job description. Then in 193 AD, things hit rock bottom in the most capitalist way imaginable. The Praetorian Guard, those bodyguards again, killed the current emperor and then literally auctioned off the entire Roman Empire to the highest bidder. They held an actual auction. A rich senator named Didius Julianus showed up and bought the whole empire, like it was a used jet ski. He was emperor for about 9 weeks before he too got. After that came the crisis of the 3rd century, a roughly 50-year stretch where Rome burned through around 26 emperors, and almost every single one of them was assassinated, often by their own troops. The average reign was measured in months. Being Roman emperor was statistically one of the most dangerous jobs that has ever existed. You had a better chance of survival as a gladiator. So how does the greatest empire in history end? Not with a bang. Not with a glorious final battle. It just sort of fizzles out, broke and exhausted and split in two. And in 476 AD, the very last emperor of the Western Roman Empire, a teenage figurehead who barely ruled anything, was quietly removed from power by a Germanic commander named Odoacer. Nobody even bothered to kill him. They just gave him a pension and told him to go away. And here's the part that should genuinely break your brain. That last emperor's name? Romulus. The Roman Empire was founded by a Romulus, and it ended with a Romulus. 1,200 years of war, marble, poison wine, horse politics, sea battles against the actual ocean, and communal toilet sponges, and the universe wrapped the whole thing in a perfect little ironic bow. But here's the thing. Rome never really died, did it? Their concrete was so good that the Pantheon's dome is still standing 2,000 years later, while the bridge near your house is crumbling after 40. Scientists only recently figured out the Romans accidentally invented self-healing concrete, and we still can't fully replicate it. Their roads still exist. Their alphabet is the one you're reading right now. Their calendar is on your phone. So the next time you flush a toilet, or drive on a paved road, or check what month it is, just remember, you are using technology perfected by a society that taxed pee, drank gladiator blood, and let a guy who declared war on the sea run the entire planet. You're not better than the Romans. You just have better grape syrup. Probably.